introduction, I believe that there is nothing that I have to add. We will speak in English, so you can, unless if you need the translation because of my poor accent, you can handle it. Okay. It's a real privilege and an honor for me to be here with you. I feel absolutely humbled to discuss with the two of you. And I don't believe that I will add a lot to the conversation, but I'm sure that you will bring a lot to the people. I will start with you, Ruth. And I would like to ask you, what has led you to move from a very well-established bank, one of the most prominent bank in Wall Street, highly respected in the world, where everyone was thinking that there was just a few steps, maybe one, to the top job, and everyone was thinking that you might well be the first lady to run one of these mammoth banks. And you moved to Alphabet. What has led you to make such a decision?
Well, first, it's incredible to be back in Paris. Always a complete joy. Wonderful to be with you. You know, during the crisis, as you said, I represented the U.S. government, helped the Treasury Department, Hank Paulson, and Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, go through that crisis, and then became the CFO at Morgan Stanley. And 6 years in, I think we restored Morgan Stanley to what it had been when I started there 25 years earlier. And I think I'm motivated by continuously learning and growing, and it reached a point where I said, what next? And had no idea, and went out to Silicon Valley, spoke to somebody who was the coach for everyone out there, for Larry Page, for Eric, for Steve Jobs, an incredible man. And after 2 hours, he surprised me with the question, would you want to be CFO of Google? And my immediate reaction was, of course. I didn't believe it was real, but I had loved the company since back in '98. First time I had a chance to invest in it, which Larry reminded me meant it was a very small number of shares, but at least I had a couple. It helped take the company public. Yeah, well, tad bit. And helped take the company public. And to me, it was just really the art of the possible. It is much of what we're focused on here. It is the opportunity to be a part of something that helps create a better future. And didn't really believe it was going to happen, but it did, and it's been fantastic.
Before we are moving to the core of the discussion, I read that you wanted to be a professor, and you failed poorly, ending up in Silicon Valley. Tell us how this happened.
Well, I fell on my head. No. So when I was an undergraduate at Stanford, actually speaking of the subject, I was a major in...
Both you were in Stanford.
We were.
Yes. This program called Symbolic Systems, which is basically a version of artificial intelligence research. And I thought that the way that I could best contribute to the progress of humanity was to go study philosophy, understand how people think, speak, communicate with each other. And so I went to Oxford in order to do that. And at that, in that course, I realized that the thing that I was most interested in was how to help humanity grow and evolve at scale, and that the nature of scholarly work is to focus. So, for example, you know, classically, the kind of work you would do was maybe 50 people in the world could understand it. It does have ultimate impact if you do something interesting, but it's very, 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 very focused. And I was more interested in how does the notion of how software is transforming the world, how does this medium help us evolve as humanity and at scale? And I realized that software entrepreneurship, the creation of new software, as what is possible in the future, as it was mentioned, was a much more interesting path. And I had realized that completely by luck by having gone to Stanford, since Stanford is actually at the heart of Silicon Valley, and it had given me a lens into this, which otherwise I would not have known at all.
You have done pretty well so far.
So far.
So far. One thing which is interesting that I wanted to mention is that Eric mentioned humanity, you are mentioning humanity, James mentioned humanity, and something which is quite interesting is that when we created Viva Technology, the event that we are creating, the first name that we found that we wanted to use was Technology for Humanity. So we are on the same page. I would like to turn back to you, Ruth, and speak a little bit about positive technology and how this is helping people. Google has made a lot to help people. And this incredible tool, everyone is using it. It is something which is part of the life of everyone. There are a few drawbacks behind, and we know that there are still unanswered questions about the future. Are you still believing in the positiveness of technology and the role that Alphabet and Google can bring to humanity and make it still positive in the years to come?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
At Google, absolutely. At Google and Alphabet, we are technology optimists. And if you go through history, you can see the positive impact that technology has had, creating opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be available. And if you go to the mission of our company, as you said in the question, Larry and Sergey set out as their mission to organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. It was a very audacious goal, but their view was if they could do that, they could have a positive impact on the lives of billions. And as we sit here today, actually, 7 of our products have over 1 billion users. We've created platforms that are available to anyone around the world, and in fact, a key mantra is build for everyone. And it enables a student in emerging markets to have the same access to information as everyone in this room. So we're tremendous optimists. We see the opportunities that are created for everyone. And then we layer on top of that, beyond our products, our ethos and our culture, and it is about finding ways to make an impact in our community. So for example, in the areas of education and job equality, we're super passionate. We've created something called Grow with Google. We actually started it here in France 6 years ago, and it's our digital skills training program. And what we've seen by doing digital skills training is we are equipping people for the jobs of today and tomorrow, and we're also seeing the confidence they develop that they can play a really positive, important role and have a positive, important future. So we're optimists. We certainly see the issues that need to be addressed. We take that responsibility very seriously, but never lose sight of the doors that are open through technology.
Let me add 2 things. So, and this is an elaboration of Ruth's comments. So I frequently describe myself as a techno-optimist, not a techno-utopian, which means that we can shape the future to be much better than the present and the past. And we have to work to do that. That's part of the reason why we do events like this, why OPTIC organizes. And so the fact that we're optimistic about the future is not foolishness, it's not blindness, it's the fact that technology can be the solution to dramatically improving the quality of human life, our ability to evolve as a species, to think about, to be wiser, to be more compassionate. It doesn't mean that there aren't faults. That doesn't mean there aren't things to improve. Doesn't mean there aren't things to learn. If you don't realize that you should have done something differently last month, the year before, you're not learning. Right? Learning is a key portion of this. And so that optimism is that when we confront these problems, to look at how technology can contribute to the solution, that we can shape the future. And that's what I think the optimism is about.
I would like that you, as I know that you are a great supporter of Mr. Trump, I would like to have your opinion on net neutrality and the decision which has been made recently in the US regarding the fact that net neutrality is something which will not be part of the daily life of the people.
So I'm a great supporter of net neutrality. I think that part of what net neutrality does is it creates a platform for innovation, for entrepreneurship. One of the key things that's frequently not spoken about enough is that part of what allowing open platforms, the internet is an open platform, the ability for startups to just connect to the internet, offer their product and service, to launch an app, these kinds of things are essential to the innovation that has flourished to bring us this kind of panoply of everything from all the world's information at your fingertips to connectivity with other people, to a transformation about how we message and communicate with each other. And what net neutrality does is it essentially says you're not allowed to essentially close and shape these highways. And so I'm a massive proponent of it. And it is, I think, a mistake in governance for the FCC to have changed its earlier position. You know, I'm not alone in Silicon Valley in this opinion.
I must say that I believe that part of the secret sauce that has made the internet so popular to everyone is the fact that everyone had access, unlimited access to internet. And with net neutrality, there is a big question mark today. Ruth, you have an opinion on this?
I agree, and I think, as Reid said, the players who are hurt the most by this are the smaller entrepreneurs. It's the ones who are just beginning, and that's why we're supportive, similarly, of net neutrality, to continue to nurture an entrepreneurial environment.
Yes, and back to what Reid has said, if we look at what happened in the last years, innovation, the fact that there is a lot of startups, a lot of developers, the fact that it is open, all this has helped internet to become what it is and Alphabet to be what it is, LinkedIn, etc. The question now is, what do you think government or countries should be doing in order to protect this environment? Because I consider personally that the decision which has been made by the FCC is entailing this. So what do you think we should be doing?
Well, I think naturally systems tend to harden around incumbents and block challengers. It's one of the things that can happen in regulation. It's one of the things that can happen in, for example, telecoms, which is the net neutrality is against. And the thing that we want to do as a society, in order to have innovation, in order to enable, you know, as broadly as we can, not universally, but as broadly as we can, challengers, entrepreneurs, new products, new services. And so you want to say, look, here, go ahead and try, build it, see if people like it. You know, take care, don't do any major damage, right? But make that happen as much as possible. And I think that's what's essential for being able to shape the future that we want to make.
But I would add, I agree, I think there's an important positive countervailing force, and that is the move to the cloud. And so what we're also seeing is by creating really the technical infrastructure, investing in the technical infrastructure that is needed to succeed in today's environment, we're making the investments, the billions of dollars of investments in data centers and machines, and providing that as a service to entrepreneurs. So they don't need to make the investments that they would have had to make 5-10 years ago. That's providing operating leverage for entrepreneurs, and I would say for every business in every industry. As you move to the cloud, focus on what you're great at. Leverage the security and technology that cloud providers have, work on the machine learning that cloud providers have to further get utility out of your data. And so that's a private sector countervailing opportunity.
Ruth, Google has made all the world of internet accessible to everyone. But it's not only that Google has done, and be it Google or Alphabet, and forgive me if I'm mixing both, but it's not very important for that conversation. There are at least two fantastic innovations which has been brought by Google. One is the driverless car, and the other one is DeepMind. And James had made a reference to the game, the Go, and what happened. Can you tell us what are the next big things that you are working on, and are you still very optimistic about the fact that you can bring new things of the same magnitude?
So a couple of years ago, we talked about the fact that Google had moved from being a mobile-first company to an AI-first company. And what we really meant by that is that machine learning and the power of these data analytics can really improve the experience for users, consumers, and the effectiveness of businesses. And you see that in our core business. A lot of
terms are used, and sometimes it's hard to appreciate how every day we are actually benefiting from machine learning, whether it's voice search or image search, the assistant that you may have, hopefully do have in your home, the recommendations, and those are daily things that we're using. In fact, half of the people who come online will come online for the first time not typing on a desktop or trying to do it on a cell phone, but with voice search, which is very exciting. But very much to your question, the next wave of things that we're focused on similarly benefit from machine learning, and DeepMind is clearly an extraordinary team there, along with our Google Brain team. We're really pleased with what they're doing, but it cuts across everything. So you mentioned self-driving cars. When I look at self-driving cars, we look at a couple of things. One, over 1 million people die every year on the road. 94% of those deaths are due to human error. If we can make a difference with self-driving cars, given the greater precision and focus that comes from all of the sensors constantly monitoring activity, that's positive. The other element that's really, I think, very exciting is that we can transform cities. We don't need parking lots when you have self-driving cars as a service. What you get dropped off, and then it goes off and it does something else. The amount of money that is spent on parking lots and the space that is devoted should be going into education or playgrounds or parks. And so we can transform cities, so that's one. Another area we're really excited about at Alphabet is everything we're doing in life sciences. And again, it relies on machine learning and data analytics. So we're taking, our view is you can take disease management from reactive to proactive. A great example is working in diabetes. We can continuously monitor glucose in the body and know when to intervene. We're doing the same with diseases like MS, where you can identify when is the body actually changing, and it's with continuous monitoring. We're partnering with great companies, many here in Europe, Novartis, Sanofi on diabetes and others. And so again, this is about machine learning. It's about disease management. It's about better reading of tests. It's extraordinary when we look at it. A terrific doctor can look at the same scan 2 weeks apart and have a different diagnosis. And when we look at that and say, what does that mean for people who don't have access to the kind of medical care that presumably everyone in this room has, we think it's about saving lives, dealing with diseases and saving lives. So very excited there. We look at something like, and I can keep going, but I'll give one more, climate change, clearly a pressing issue. We run what are viewed as amongst, if not the most efficient data centers, but we used machine learning to look at our energy utilization and meaningfully improved energy utilization. And so again, the ability to address a very important social issue. That's where we're going. It is machine learning at the core. It is providing solutions to problems that can make a difference for billions, and that's, again, goes back to the optimism point.
Reid, you want to react to this?
Well, I essentially completely agree. As an investor, I've actually made a number of investments in autonomous vehicles. I wrote an essay a couple of years ago that I published on LinkedIn that said we should accelerate as much as possible to a complete AV universe. On the more kind of all of the deaths, the possibility of saving lives, saving accidents. Also, on the road structure you can have 4 to 6 times as much throughput on the exact same road infrastructure. And one of the things that I put in to add a little bit of spice to it is drinking and driving will go from essentially a criminal and evil activity to something that you might enjoy. As part of the... Yes, and while you're driving, with autonomous vehicles. And so I think that's important. The other thing to add into the life sciences part of what Ruth was talking about, as you begin to combine various parts of this, take, for example, image recognition that you get from a cell phone, together with the data and analysis, you can essentially make an app that can detect skin cancer for anyone in the world. That's, if you have a smartphone, you can then do that. That's, enormously liberating, and also inclusion across the entire world, all of which is super important by bringing these technologies to all of humanity.
So this leads us to speak a little bit about AI. And AI is something that is making people dreaming and scaring them to death. I don't need to remind everyone Stanley Kubrick's movie and what HAL did, suddenly taking control. And people are speaking about the fact that two computers may develop a third language that will be absolutely impossible for any hacker in the world to understand. So if we can cover a little bit more AI on maybe 2 or 3 aspects. The first one is job. I heard what James has said, but I also heard the transition, and I know that sometimes transition is unbearable for the people. We can speak also about control of the life of the people, because with AI you have access to every single information, and people may be scared that, okay, this will go to NSA or who knows, the new Secret Service of Russia. And the third aspect is what about education and the fact that algorithms are in a black box and nobody knows what there is in it. So, Ruth, you want to start with?
There's a lot of your questions. Let me try and okay, perfect.
It takes time, so don't worry.
So the first thing is it's always easier to see the jobs that might be transformed or displaced than to envision the ones that are coming. That's been true throughout history. You think about my field and the concern, would calculators displace finance professionals? No, they're tools, they provide leverage, they let us do something else. And so one of the questions is what is the nature of work and how does the nature of work change, and really how do these become tools that provide us with greater operating leverage? That's the first point. The second is we would very much agree that one needs to be careful whenever going through transitions. Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, yesterday said that in his view, machine learning AI is somewhat like, you can think of it like fire. Fire has a negative consequence if not managed, but obviously it's improved our lives, and it's been an important part of the ability to move forward, heat, cook, everything else. But it's like anything. We've got to make sure that we're being responsible in what we're doing. The question on bias is a very important one. There's no question that we're spending time thinking about it to make sure that we're getting at the root of what is bias, and it's not easy. There's bias that we all have every day. So now we're saying, how do we do it better when we're looking at big data sets? We have 2 answers to that, and I know they're not complete, and we're continuing to work on it. But one is collaboration across the industry. It's about opening up data sets. We have something called TensorFlow. It's open source machine learning. It's enabling people to benefit from our library so that we can try and get at better answers. It's about including a host of disciplines, humanists being a very important one, ethicists being a very important one, as we're looking at this on an industry basis and forming groups to try and focus on these issues. And then second, within Google, we're merging humanists, social scientists, and engineers. You were really at the forefront of that when you got when you did your Oxford work, but we think that's absolutely critical. It's really trying to understand where can bias feed in. So as Reid said in the opening comments, we see the positive. We also see that with the incredible impact that these technologies can have, there's a tremendous responsibility. And part of the way we approach it is, one, working across industries, companies to try and get at the issues, but also acknowledging when we're not quite there and we need to do more.
So in the Stanley Kubrick film, it was, "I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that." That's, of course, changing to, "Yes, Dave, I can do that." And that's part of what I think we are seeing in the development. So when the automobile was first introduced, a law was passed to have someone walking in front of it waving a flag because you had this dangerous vehicle. And obviously that passed very quickly because you realized you didn't get all the benefits of the automobile, you couldn't bring transport to the entire world as a function of this, and that you had to essentially adjust society. Now, you begin to think, you know, as James very rightly pointed out, a bunch of these tasks can be automated, and the transition is a very important part of society, and it's a very important part of human fabric. And I think the solutions to this are a combination of kind of social policy, not so much trying to enshrine the past against the future, which is a common reflex and mistake, a little bit what I was referring to in terms of the guy with the flag walking in front of the car, but is to say, okay, how do we help these people? How do we help get to the future? Because we should all get there together. And so there's a set of different things about how you can say, well, how do we help with the transition to other jobs? How do we enable the skills? How do we enable learning? But the other thing I think about is, well, how do we develop the technology that helps with that, right? How can we say, look, here's a bunch of ways that we can build, for example, machine learning, AI techniques, to help people find new work, find what other kinds of work they can do, find the skills that would appeal to them that they could learn in doing that. And that's obviously a bunch of the stuff that we look at pretty carefully at LinkedIn. We have this thing we call the economic graph, which is the digital representation of all the things that matter in work. It's like skills and jobs and companies and universities and so forth. And what are those things that can help me navigate? And that's the kind of thing that we should be doing both as a private sector and as a society. And it doesn't mean that it'll be, completely easy. It'll be a walk in the park. All society change has some turmoil. I mean, the move from the agricultural to the industrial revolution was a very, very difficult thing. Ultimately, really good. And I think what we should take as learning away from that is say, well, how could we have made that better for people? How could we have made it easier to reskill, have more of a social safety net in terms of how we operate? How do we deploy technology to make that transition for people easier? That's, I think, the kinds of question we should be asking.
Point. Just to be really clear, I mentioned that one of the things we're very excited about is the work we're doing in digital skills training. But that is not about teaching people to do the high-level coding that you could do. That is addressing things as simple as how do you use spreadsheets, how do you create presentations, how do you write an email. 90% of jobs in the EU today require some level like that of digital skills, and yet 50% of companies say they can't find people to fill those jobs. And those are basic level, let me use the tools that exist today. So that's the type of skilling work that we're doing within grasp of everyone if they're given the opportunity, which is why I think the light bulb goes off when we put people through our programs. Having spent time in one of our digital skills centers, it was really inspiring. You look at people who felt they had become obsolete. They were that person who had to wave the red flag in front of the car. And no, then they see that they can use, these are skills at their fingertips.
And to add one other thing as a way these come together, one of the nonprofits that I helped fund and get going in the US is called Opportunity at Work. And what it realizes is, how do we get inclusion in all these new technical jobs? Because they're not just at high-level coding and everything else. It's everything from spreadsheets to analysis to developing a web page to producing new kinds of content. And there's all these opportunities for people to learn them. So you make those opportunities available to them. You provide a scholarship basis by which they can go do that, where the scholarship's only repaid if they have an increase in income from doing it. Volunteers come in to essentially do informational interviewing and to say, hey, you should do this or this, and you'd be good at this, and so forth, and brings a network of people to do that. And this program, Opportunity at Work, was precisely the reason why Byron Agist and Anne-Marie Slaughter and myself helped build this, was that it's a model for what public policy could be. It's a way that essentially social programs could actually be constructed in order to help citizens and people all get to the future together.
Yeah, this is the difference between activity and jobs, if I have clearly understood what James has said. By the same token, there will be jobs which will be destroyed. This is something that we can expect. The key question is, how do we prepare the next generation in order to avoid that this is a shock and it is creating a crisis, because we should not forget that it is technology for humanity. So how do we address this humanity aspect, which is extremely important? Education? What else?
Well, so there's definitely education. There's definitely, by the way, entrepreneurship, which Ruth gestured at earlier, which is, I think, a lot of the new jobs will be created by new companies, new products, new services. Why supporting entrepreneurship is so key. I also think that when people say, well, look, a lot of stuff is automated, Well, there's a tremendous amount of room in interpersonal economy, whether it's, like, for example, education frequently has the pressure to have more students per class because you're trying to make the economics work. What if it goes to fewer students per class? Or healthcare, in terms of, does a doctor has to see a person every 5 minutes, or can they actually spend 30 minutes with them and kind of talk through things? And so there's a lot of actually human interaction professions that could scale greatly as well. I think there's a variety of ways to get there.
Okay, as we are to almost finish in a few minutes, and I know that you have to get to the airport, I would like to put a selfish question as a Frenchman. As a Frenchman, when I'm looking at my country, and we see a lot of efforts which have been done by various governments in order to participate to this revolution and to be part of the game. Nevertheless, what I'm seeing is that the big platforms are in the US and China, and we are struggling to be part of the top game. And I would like to ask you for your advice. What should we be doing that we are not doing yet in order that one day you may be either investing massively in France or frightened by the strength of our operations?
Well, let me start with one of my favorite innovations at Google, and it was right here in Paris, and it's the Google Cultural Institute, and it was our first virtual reality headset called Cardboard. And those were started here in Paris, and they're nothing short of magical. So if you're not familiar with it, we had a brilliant engineer who said, you can take some very inexpensive cardboard, slide in your mobile phone, and we can get you to have a virtual reality experience. We had another brilliant colleague who said, I want to open up museums and art to everyone around the globe. And we now have 1,000 museums that are on the Google Cultural Institute. You can get to millions of pieces of art. And we marry those two, going back to Reid's comment about the importance of education. We can go into any school and we give students what we call expeditions, where we take them around the world, we take them back in history, they can go to the Musée d'Orsay, even if they can't afford to get on a plane. And what's magical about that is that it's opening the world and it's making it smaller. It's a really energizing education. So we firmly believe that education is an important part of it. There is a ton of exciting innovation going on here today. We're really proud to be a part of it, and we are increasing our investments here in Paris and France as a result, because we think it's an important place to be, and thrilled to be here. I just can't speak French. I got to work on that. My sons can, I can't.
No, and thank you for coming, because I know that you are making a big effort, both of you, and I know that you are coming specifically for that meeting and leaving tomorrow morning. So we really appreciate. So, a few words.
Just to add very quickly, there's a tremendous amount of great technology talent, universities, innovation, insight here. One of my co-founders at LinkedIn was a French expat who came over to Silicon Valley, and Jean-Luc Vaillant. And I think that and Macron, I think, making great steps in the right direction for saying, look, how do we attract entrepreneurs here? How do we enable that? If I were to make a suggestion, the key thing is how to enable the ability for small organizations to take experimental shots on goal. The labor laws around how you can hire and have the firm. Yes, it's improving. It's like, that's how I started with Macron, and the government is doing great steps, but keep going.
Keep going. Okay, I would like to thank you very warmly. It is the easiest job to be a moderator with two personalities like yours. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. And Thank you.